Before we jump in, I do want to say that this War Within guide for Frost Mage is going to be both very beginner friendly if you're new to the class, spec, or even WoW, and it's also veteran friendly as well, giving you everything you need to know to succeed in this spec. Let's jump straight into it then. So we're going to start off with the stat priority. Of course, our major or primary stat is going to be intellect. We want to get a higher and higher eye level or item level of gear to get more and more intellect and therefore doing more damage with our spells. I will put the stat priority on screen here for you, although I would say to follow this very loosely. If you know how, you should be simming your character to really see which piece of gear is best. And we should only be looking at the secondary stats and which is better when we're comparing a piece of gear or two pieces of gear that are the same eye level. TLDR, a higher piece of eye level gear is generally always going to be a raid, and that's all you really need to worry about, especially so early in the expansion. Haste increases your attack and spell casting speed. Mastery is very interesting. If you are a beginner, I'm going to go through this in a lot more depth in the rotation part of the video, so don't worry. But what does our mastery do then? Well, for us Frost Mages, it's called Icicles. Casting a lot of our main spells, those being Frostbolt, Ice Lance, Flurry, they grant us an Icicle. When we then cast our Ice Lance, it's going to cause all of our icicles that we've got stored up to actually begin launching at the target, each dealing frost damage. Frostbolt and Flurry have a 15% chance to generate 2 icicles. You can only have up to 5 icicles stored at a time, and any excess will then be automatically launched at your... It's also going to increase the damage of Frozen Orb, Blizzard, and Comet Storm by 15%, and it's going to increase the damage of our Ice Lance, Glacial Spike, and Ray of Frost by 10%. Remember, all of this is happening passively, so you don't actually have to worry too much about it if you are new to the spec. And again, we will be going through in full detail the whole rotation shortly. So we've got Critical Strike, giving you an extra chance of doing more damage. Lastly, we have Versatility, which is going to simply increase your damage done, increase any healing done, and also reduce damage taken. It's a really good all-round stat. Looking quickly then at our set bonus as a Frost Mage in Season 1, our 2 set bonus is increasing our Ice Lance damage, and our 4 set bonus is that damage dealt by our Fingers of Frost, enhanced Ice Lances invoke a Frigid Pulse, dealing frost damage to nearby targets. Again, that's going to be happening passively. So now we're going to look at the utilities and some of the defensives, etc. that we have available to us as a mage. Now, I am specifically saying mage here because these are not specialization utilities. These are actually available to you no matter which spec, Frost, Fire, or Arcane, you are going with as a mage in the War Within. So if you would like to try out some other classes, which I have done guides for, then feel free. You won't have to relearn all of this part of the video. So on the left here, we have things that are more affecting other people, so our enemies. And on the right-hand side, we've got some really useful abilities that are actually enhancing us and our allies. Now, there are a lot more utilities that I could go through, but I don't want to overwhelm you as this is a beginner video, and these are the core and important ones I think you should know about. When you're more comfortable with your specialization, I would recommend going through the spellbook here and just seeing what's what. The same would be with the Mage talent tree on the left of your talents. So then, starting off, we have Polymorph. This is going to transform your enemy into a sheep, incapacitating them for an entire minute, and they cannot take any actions. They will regenerate any health that they have, so if you've got them down to 10% health, it's probably not the best time to polymorph them, but it will take them out of the action for a while so that you can focus on any, friends that they may have lying around. We also have Frost Nova here, which when I use, you can see has encased my enemies in ice, freezing them in place for 6 seconds, but damage may interrupt that freeze effect. We also have Slow, which you can see I've put on this enemy here, reduces the target's movement speed by 50% for 15 seconds. We've also got Ring of Frost, which is placeable, so I can place it here, as you can see. Summoning a Ring of Frost for 10 seconds at that location. Enemies entering it are incapacitated for 10 seconds. When the incapacitate expires, they're then slowed by 65% for 4 seconds. So it completely stops them in their tracks, and then it slows them a bit after. And lastly, we have Counterspell. This simply will kick, otherwise known as interrupt, the enemy's spell casting. So if they're casting a spell, you can interrupt that. And that is really, really important if you're doing PvP or things like Mythic Plus. Not as important in raiding. Still might be if there's certain ads, etc. in the fights, but generally it's more used in kind of Mythic Plus, leveling, questing, and PvP. So going on to the other side then, we've got Ice Block, where you actually incapacitate yourself into a block of ice, but prevents all damage being done onto you. Now, you cannot actually use this again for 30 seconds. You'll have a debuff, as you can see up here, Hypothermia. We have Mass Barrier, casting Prismatic Barrier on yourself and allies for, how long for? Quite a long time, a whole minute. As you can see up here, Prismatic Barrier absorbs damage, magic damage taken reduced by 25%, duration of all harmful magic effects on you are reduced, and avoidance is increased by 5%. So avoidance here is another stat that we didn't go through in the stat priorities because we only have it sometimes. Reduces damage taken from area of effect attacks, or AoE, by 5%. We then have Greater Invisibility, making you invisible and untargetable for 20 seconds, removing all threat, and any action will cancel the effect. You take 60% reduced damage while invisible. We then have two abilities which we can actually massively impact our allies. Arcane Intellect, one of my favourites. Up here we can see Intellect is increased by 5%. This is the primary stat that we use as mages. And when you use this, it will actually go on you, any party members, and any raid members that you are in a group with. And you can target people in the wild and also give it to them as well. Lastly, we have Time Warp. This is otherwise known as Bloodlust or Heroism, increasing the haste of all party and raid members by 30% for 40 seconds. So you're going to cast your spells a lot quicker. And this is the de facto biggest cooldown in the game. Generally, your raid leader or group leader will call out when to use this. And you can see here, you now have Temporal Displacement. You cannot benefit from Time Warp or other similar effects for 10 minutes. And this is going to be the same if a Shaman uses Bloodlust, if an Evoker uses... Is it Fury of the Aspects? Can't remember what it's called. If anyone uses a similar effect, you will all have that 10-minute cooldown. So whether a mage uses it or a shaman uses it in your group, you all are affected by the cooldown. What I'm trying to say is, if you've used it, a shaman cannot then use Bloodlust and use their one. It literally affects the whole group. Now, as I said, there are more in your spell book that you should probably look through. But again, don't overwhelm yourself. First, let's learn how we're going to play the spec. These are the general and most important ones that you are going to be using in the War Within. So now we're going to be looking through Frost Mage's rotation for the War Within. We're going to be looking at both Mythic Plus and Raiding, starting off with the single target priority, which is the Raiding build. The talents are a bit different, but it's the same hero talents, which is Spell Slinger. We're going to go into that in more detail later. And that is basically where we're sharding out loads of little bits of ice, etc. It's really, really cool. So we've got two priority lists here, one inside our Icy Veins and one outside. A lot of it does match up, as you can see. Icy Veins is a 2-minute cooldown. Accelerates your spellcasting for 30 seconds, giving you a lot of haste. Activating Icy Veins also summons a water elemental, which is going to increase frost damage you deal to your target. So this top priority list is what we're doing in the 30-second Icy Veins window. First of all, we're going to be using Ice Lance only if the target is affected by 2 stacks of Winter's Chill. So what is Winter's Chill? Well, Flurry unleashes a flurry of ice, striking the target. Each one reduces their movement speed and has a chance to activate Glacial Assault and apply Winter's Chill to the target. Winter's Chill causes the target to take damage from your spells as if it were frozen. TLDR, a lot of our spells will do more damage if the target is frozen. So what Winter's Chill does, and if I use it here, you can see now the target has 2 stacks of Winter's Chill, and I can use Ice Lance. It now only has 1 stack of Winter's Chill. So we're using Ice Lance here if the target has 2 stacks of Winter's Chill. Then we're only going to use Flurry if the target has no Winter's Chill and our last spell was either Glacial Spike or Frostbolt. Okay? Otherwise, we're going to move down and use Frozen Orb. Basically, it does a huge orb, as you can see, and it's going to generate something called Fingers of Frost. This is this here, and I'm going to actually show you it in the talents. Fingers of Frost. Frostbolt has an 18% chance, and Frozen Orb has a chance to grant Fingers of Frost. Fingers of Frost causes your next Ice Lance to deal damage as if the target were frozen. So, if we've got Ice Lance again here, so we've got it there at the top, if we've got 2 stacks of Winter's Chill, we're going to use Flurry if there's no Winter's Chill, if our last cast spell was Glacial Spike or Frostbolt. We're going to use Frozen Orb on cooldown. Then we're going to use Ice Lance here if we have Fingers of Frost or there's only 1 stack of Winter's Chill. Then we're going to use Comet Storm on cooldown if the target is affected by Winter's Chill. And if both Comet Storm and Frozen Orb are on cooldown, we're going to use Shifting Power. If you have 5 icicles, then we're going to use Glacial Spike. If you've forgotten what icicles are, it's from your mastery. Casting some of your spells means you start to store up icicles. If I actually use Frostbolt here, can you see I've got a little icicle? And we can have up to 5 of these, and then they'll start shooting at our enemies, basically. And if we can't use any of these things, then we're just going to use Flurry. And if we can't even use Flurry, we're just going to use Frostbolt. So I know it seems a bit weird going down the list, like what can we use, and half of it we can't until we get to the end. But once we get to here, basically look at it as, okay, we haven't used anything, so we're going to use Flurry. Oh, that's generated 2 stacks of Winter's Chill, so I can use my Ice Lance. And then it would basically be, okay, what was the last spell we cast? It wasn't Glacial Spike or Frostbolt, so I'm going to use my Frozen Orb on cooldown. Then I'm going to use my Ice Lance because I've got Fingers of Frost, etc. And it kind of revolves like that. So we've now got like 1 stack, and we're like, okay, we can use Comet Storm, and then we're going to use Shifting Power because we've just used that, and then we can use Glacial Spike, and it kind of goes in that sort of order. What these 3 spells here do is, Comet Storm calls down a series of 7 icy comets on and around the target that deal frost damage to all enemies. Shifting Power draws power from you, reducing your cooldowns, like Icy Veins. Flurry, we've explained already, and Frostbolt basically just hurls a bolt of frost at the enemy. So again, when we're in the Icy Veins window, if the target has 2 stacks of Winter's Chill, we're going to use Ice Lance. Otherwise, pretty much we're going to use Flurry, use Frozen Orb on cooldown. We're using Ice Lance if we have 1 stack of Winter's Chill or any Fingers of Frost, etc. Comet Storm if they're affected by Winter's Chill, which they are. After that, you can use Shifting Power. Glacial Spike if you are at 5 icicles. Otherwise, use Flurry. And otherwise, if there's nothing else to use, then it's going to be Frostbolt. And that is pretty much the priority. Outside of Icy Veins, we're going to use, obviously, Icy Veins to get into Icy Veins window. But outside of that, it will be Flurry for the same reasons we've used it here. Then it's going to be Ice Lance if you've got 4 icicles and have Fingers of Frost or Winter's Chill. Then use your Ray of Frost pretty much on cooldown with Winter's Chill. Then use your Frozen Orb on cooldown. Then use Comet Storm if they have Winter's Chill. And then Shifting Power if everything else is on cooldown, which it isn't, but, if it was. And then again, Glacial Spike at 5 icicles, same as when you're inside Icy Veins. And then Ice Lance, just like it is here, where it's if they have Winter's Chill or Fingers of Frost. And otherwise, it's going to be Frostbolt. And that pretty much is the priority list and rotation. It is quite a complex rotation to follow. You've got to remember a lot of different things and say, has it got Winter's Chill? How many icicles have I got, etc. But with a little bit of practice, maybe rewatch this rotation part of the video, a few times if you're not sure. And it will actually, sink in fairly quickly. And using a weak aura would be useful for that as well. Now moving on to the Mythic Plus rotation, which is for AoE. It hasn't really, so the talents haven't really changed too much. The rotation, however, is a lot simpler. Of course, use Icy Veins on cooldown. And then we're going to use Cone of Cold, but only if our last cast was Comet Storm. So Comet Storm is down here. So once you do use Comet Storm, come back and then use Cone of Cold. Otherwise, use Frozen Orb on cooldown and use Blizzard. You're actually then going to use Frostbolt next until you hit the maximum stacks of something here called Death's Chill. While Icy Veins is active, damaging an enemy with Frostbolt increases spell damage by 1%, and that can stack up to 15 times. And at this point, you actually want to get the max stacks while in your Icy Veins window at this point, but only in the Icy Veins window. After that, it's going to be Comet Storm. Of course, that's when you then use your Cone of Cold. Then it's going to be Shifting Power. Then it's going to be Glacial Spike. Then it's going to be Flurry if Winter's Chill is not already on the target. And if you do have Winter's Chill or Fingers of Frost active, then use Ice Lance. And if nothing else, then it's going to be Frostbolt. So again, use your Icy Veins, use your Cone of Cold if your last spell was Comet Storm, use your Frozen Orb and your Blizzard. If you're in the Icy Veins window, you're going to use Frostbolt to get the maximum stacks from the Death's Chill buff. Otherwise, use Comet Storm. Use your Shifting Power to get Icy Veins off cooldown a lot quicker. Glacial Spike at 5, and then Flurry, and then Ice Lance, and then Frostbolt. That really is all there is to it for that one. So for this build, we're going with Spell Slinger, which is a really interesting one, and I really like it, especially as Frost, where we're kind of shattering things and splintering off bits of ice. When you consume Winter's Chill, you're going to fire a Frost Splinter at your target, and that's going to embed itself into the target and then cause damage over 18 seconds. On the left side, casting Icy Veins conjures 8 Frost Splinters. And during Icy Veins, whenever you conjure a Frost Splinter, you actually are going to then conjure another one. A choice node here, I like to go for Slippery Slinging, where you have 40% increased movement speed during alter time. Shifting Power, fires a barrage of 8 Frost Splinters at random enemies. In the middle, while a target is under the effects of Blizzard, 30% of the direct damage dealt by Frost Splinter is also dealt to nearby enemies. Another choice node, which again is up to you, it's a defensive option. I go to Phasmantle Image, where Mirror Image reduces even more damage. Gain some critical strike and damage with Force of Will. Splintering Orbs, enemies damaged by a Frozen Orb will also conjure a Frost Splinter, and Frozen Orb damage is increased. Another choice node, I like to go for Unerring Proficiency. Each time you conjure a Frost Splinter, increase the damage of your next Ice Nova, and that can stack up to 60 times. Spellfrost Teachings, direct damage from Frost Splinters has a small chance to reset the cooldown of Frozen Orb and increase all damage dealt by Frozen Orb. Lastly, Splinter Storm. Whenever you have 8 or more embedded into your enemies, you're going to cast a Splinter Storm, where you shatter all of the embedded splinters, dealing their remaining dot or damage over time, periodic damage instantly. So basically, they're not just going to stack up forever. If you get more than 8, it's going to go boom and shatter them all. When that happens, you're going to conjure a Frost Splinter for each splinter shattered, and then unleash them in a devastating barrage, dealing damage to your target for each splinter in the Splinter Storm. Splinter Storm is also going to apply Winter's Chill. So there's a lot going on here. TLDR, when you have over 8 Frost Splinters embedded into your enemy, it's going to explode, making more Frost Splinters, doing loads more damage, and then applying Winter's Chill to them. That's basically what is happening. I love Spellslinger because it's all passively happening. It's not adding too much or really much at all to the actual rotation itself, while still being a really, really fun way of playing. All these ice splintering, icicles splintering off into our enemies. I think it's a really cool class fantasy for Frost. And that is what we are going with in this build. Looking finally at the consumables and enchants, etc. we're going to use as a mage in the War Within, a few things have changed. So Nerubian Gem Weavers, these are the sockets you can add to your gear, which are coming from the weekly vault. And we can add these to our head, wrist and waist. You can also now add 2 sockets to your neck and both rings with the magnificent jeweler's settings in the War Within. So 2 on the neck, 2 on each ring. Now let's look at the enchants. Winged Grace gives avoidance and reduces fall damage. Crystalline Radiance gives primary stats, so intellect. Chant of Armored Avoidance is avoidance. Sunset Spellthread gives intellect and stamina. Defender's March increases your stamina. You can go for Scout's March, I think it's called, which increases your speed instead. But a bit squishy, I like to go for Defender's March. Haste on both enchants for the rings, unless you're using a different secondary stat, depending on maybe your, simming your character, etc. And then the Authority of Radiant Power, where basically you have a chance when doing damage to cause a massive amount of damage on your target and also increase your primary stat. Then looking at the consumables, you can go for the Flask of Alchemical Chaos. I prefer the Tempered Versatility one because it's giving versatility, meaning we're adding damage but also reducing damage, and it's a pretty nice, kind of overall flask, same as what we were using in the previous expansion. And then we can go for the Feast of Midnight Masquerade for intellect. Tempered Potion. What this does is it will actually give you all the other secondary stats that you don't get from your flask, which I think is pretty neat. Healing Potion is called an Algari Healing Potion in this expansion, which is the War Within. Algari Mana Oil, which is nice. They are adding back Mana Oil, increases critical strike and haste. Crystallized Augment Rune to add intellect if you are using Augment Runes. And then the Blasphemite is really interesting. You can see here we're using different gems. So the Blasphemite increases primary stat, and it also increases your critical effect of your crits by 0.15% per different color gem used. Meaning if we use an Onyx, Sapphire, Emerald, and Ruby, then we're going to get 0.60% increased effect. Whereas if we only used all of one color, we'd only get 15%. So you want to kind of use these 4 different colors to get more effect from your Blasphemite. After that, I would say to use the colored gems. If you've got more than four gem slots, I would say to simulate your character, maybe look at your stat priority and see kind of what you need the most at that point for your character, because it could be different depending on the gear levels you have at that point. Thank you so much for watching this guide. I hope it was really useful for you in The War Within Season 1, whether it was for Mythic Plus or raiding. If you do have any questions, I'll be happy to help. My Patreon is in the description below, and that is where you can find my LVUI profiles, which I'll show you in a second. And also, I'm putting together a huge macro list for every single spec that's going to be really useful for you in The War Within as well. I am doing all classes and specs for The War Within, so if you are new to the channel, then please do click this playlist here to check out what else I have, which is all of them. There will also be PvP guides on this channel as well for War Within Season 1, so make sure to look out for that. This here is the UI that I was referring to. As you can see, we've got target frames, etc., left and right, and raid frames go in the middle here, and then weak auras in the middle with an action bar down here. Chat is behind where my camera is. Minimap and details, etc., are here on the right. All of the plater profiles, the voodoo, the LVUI, etc., details profile has all been made by me. And again, you can get this on my Patreon should you like it.